Welcome back to your newest obsession, the NeuroSpicy MomPod. I'm your host, Austen Marie, and this is the safe corner of the internet where we name what's real, honor what's hard, and talk about how to move through it without burning ourselves out or betraying our nervous system in the process. Today's episode is for anyone who's ever felt like doing something new, even something small, completely short-circuited their brain. Whether it's applying for a job, walking into a new classroom, or trying something that shouldn't be a big deal, and yet our body reacts like you're about to be eaten by a bear. Yeah, same. We are going to unpack the actual neurology behind why that happens, why our brains read new as danger, and how that shows up for both adults and kids who are neurodivergent. And of course, I'm going to give you some things that can actually help, things that you can do for yourself and for your kiddos, especially as we're headed into back to school season or just trying to do life without spiraling. Let's start with the science. When something unfamiliar shows up, new job, new school, new therapist, new route to the grocery store, your brain doesn't just go, "Oh, interesting, let's explore that." It goes, "What is this? Are we safe? Can we predict it? Is this going to hurt?" That reaction is coming straight from the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. And studies show that neurodivergent folks, especially autistic and ADHD brains, have heightened amygdala activity in uncertain or novel situations. So that full body panic you feel before starting something new, it's not just anxiety, it's your brain going code red because it doesn't know what to expect. This is what researchers call intolerance of uncertainty, which basically means that not knowing what's going to happen feels unsafe or even unbearable. It's that deep discomfort with vague plans, shifting routines, or situations where you don't have a clear mental map. If there's no script, no predictability, our nervous system often treats it like a real threat. And I want to slow down here for a second, because if you've lived most of your life undiagnosed, you might not even realize that this is what you're experiencing, and what you're experiencing is neurological. So let's talk about what intolerance of uncertainty actually feels like in the body. It might look like that tight chest feeling when you know you have to make a phone call, but you just can't bring yourself to do it. It's that sudden brain fog or shutdown the second someone asks you a question that you weren't prepared for. It's canceling plans at the last minute, not because you didn't want to go, but because your body started spiraling over what to wear, who might be there, or how long it would last. It's the dread in your stomach when your day doesn't go exactly as planned. It's feeling exhausted by choices or snapping over small disruptions, or needing to rehearse a conversation in your head 500 times before you can actually say it out loud. Sometimes it can feel like panic. Sometimes it feels like numbness. Sometimes it feels like you're watching your life happen from the outside while your whole body goes, nope. And if you've spent your life being told you're too sensitive or too dramatic, you might not even clock that this is happening to you. You might have just internalized it as a character flaw, when really it's your nervous system doing its best to protect you in a world that never felt predictable or safe. Now, when you layer that with executive dysfunction, that classy neurospicy difficult with starting things or organizing them, and add in the sensory unknowns, will it be too loud? Will it be too bright? Are the people there going to be weird? Am I going to be weird? It really becomes the perfect storm. Maybe the last time you tried something new, you got overwhelmed, you were misunderstood, or maybe you were even rejected. And your nervous system remembers. That fear gets stored in your body. And even when something isn't dangerous, your brain doesn't always know the difference, especially when it never learned how to feel safe in the first place. It's not that we don't want to change, it's that we don't feel safe enough to move forward. That's a totally different story than being lazy or unmotivated. That freeze response isn't failure. It's your body doing exactly what it was designed to do. to keep you safe. So if you find yourself frozen before taking action or watching your kid melt down before something new, pause and ask, what part of me doesn't feel safe yet? Because that question, that's where the healing actually starts. So now that we've talked about how this shows up in our adult bodies, let's talk about how it plays out in our kids, especially our neurospicy ones. Because the truth is, most of them cannot explain what's happening in their bodies. They just feel it, and it comes out as refusal, meltdowns, clinging, or what schools love to call behavior problems. Let me say this loud for the people in the back. Resistance isn't always defiance. It's often dysregulation. When a child is entering a new situation, like starting school, switching classrooms, meeting a new teacher, or even just returning after a break, their nervous system goes through the same threat scanning process we just talked about, except they don't have the language, tools, or autonomy we have as adults to name it or manage it. So it comes out sideways. For some kids, that looks like crying in the car or refusing to get dressed in the morning. For others, it's suddenly needing to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes before school or clinging to you like a baby koala at drop-off. Some kids might explode with anger or shut down completely. And all of it makes sense when you realize that their internal safety system is screaming, I don't know what's going to happen and I don't feel safe. And again, this isn't about logic. You cannot rationalize a nervous system into regulation. You cannot say, you were fine yesterday, so what's the big deal? And expect it to land. In fact, that kind of response often makes things worse because it tells the child that what they're feeling is wrong, when in reality, it's their internal alert system doing exactly what it's wired to do. Here's another layer for neurodivergent kids. Even small changes can feel huge. A substitute teacher, a seating chart change, a different snack, a new pair of shoes that feel wrong on their feet. All of these things can add up, and when their cup is already full from sensory input, emotional labor, or masking all day, it doesn't take much for that cup to overflow. And if your child has a PDA profile, pathological demand avoidance, even gentle suggestions can trigger that same fight or flight response because the demand, even if it's framed softly, can still feel like a loss of control to their nervous system. So what looks like non-compliance might actually be a trauma-informed and very nervous system honest no. So if mornings feel like war zones, or your child unravels the second they get home from school, or they seem fine all day only to explode at night, this is why. It's not bad behavior. It's a body begging for safety. And the most powerful thing we can do as parents is shift our lens from how do I make them do it to how can I help them feel safe enough to try? Because that question changes everything. Okay, so now that we understand why our brains and bodies freak out when we face new things, let's talk about how to actually work with our nervous systems instead of against them. Because it's not about pushing harder, faking confidence, or telling your kids, it's fine, just try. It's about building a foundation of safety, internally and externally, so our brains don't have to go into survival mode every time something shifts. Let's start with something called the Polyvagal Theory. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth going deeper because it's become a big part of how many people, especially in trauma and neurodivergent spaces, are learning to understand regulation. It's developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. The theory says that our bodies are consistently scanning the environment for cues of safety or danger. This process is called neuroception, and it happens automatically below our conscious awareness. The core idea is this: if your body doesn't feel safe, it literally can't access your thinking brain. You lose access to your executive function, your communication, logic, and planning. You go straight into survival mode. fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Now I want to pause and say something important here. Polyvagal theory is just that. It's a theory. And while it's been incredibly helpful for many people, including myself, it's not without its critiques. Some researchers have raised concerns that parts of it aren't fully supported by hard data, or that it's been oversimplified in the wellness space. And I think that's valid. So when I share it here, I'm offering it as a lens, a way to begin understanding what might be happening in our bodies. It's not the full picture, and it doesn't have to be. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and always make room for curiosity. One of my favorite tools for understanding what's happening in the brain when we're dysregulated is a model developed by Dr. Dan Siegel called the hand brain. It's a super simple visual way to understand how stress affects the brain, and I love using it just because it clicks. So picture this. You hold up your hand and you make a fist, your fingers wrapped over your thumb representing your thinking brain. This is your prefrontal cortex. That's the part responsible for the decision-making, the regulating emotions, planning, and your language. Your thumb is tucked inside of the fist, and this is your feeling brain. Your amygdala lives here, the part of the brain that responds to fear and stress. Now imagine something stressful happens. Maybe your kids start screaming, or your schedule gets thrown off, or you're already on edge and something small pushes you over. In that moment, you flip your lid. Your fingers fly up, your thinking brain goes offline, and all you've got now is your survival brain running the show. And this is why we cannot just say, calm down, or just try harder when they're dysregulated. The part of the brain that can do those things is literally offline. It's not you being dramatic or lazy. It's your body responding exactly how it's wired to respond to perceived threats. You need safety before you can function. And this is just as true for our kids. If they've flipped their lid, they're not being disrespectful or difficult. They're dysregulated. They're doing the best they can with the brain and body they have in that moment. And until they can feel safe again, they literally cannot cooperate or comply in the way adults often expect. So now that we understand why this happens, why our brains and our kids' brains go into panic mode when faced with something new, let's talk about what actually helps. There's no one-size-fits-all fix, but there are some really supportive, science-backed ways to move through these moments that are grounded in trauma-informed care and nervous system regulation. First off, we are social creatures, and our nervous systems are wired to sync with each other. So one of our most powerful tools we have is co-regulation. When we stay grounded, calm, and present, our kids feel that. It's not about saying the perfect thing every time. It's about the energy that we bring. Our body becomes the message. You're safe with me. So before you jump into fixing or directing, take one slow breath. Drop your shoulders, lower your voice, let your own regulation lead the way. Another helpful strategy is predictability and previewing. Neurodivergent brains love patterns. We feel safer when we know what's coming next. So creating a sense of structure, even in little ways, can really settle the nervous system. That could be something like saying out loud, okay, first we're going to the office, then we're going to meet your teacher, then we'll come back home. It doesn't have to be fancy, just consistent. It gives the brain something to hold on to when everything else feels uncertain. And then there's the body. You can't outthink a flipped lid. Regulation happens within the body. That's why things like deep pressure, movement, or sensory grounding are so effective. It's not just a vibe. This is supported by somatic therapy, occupational therapy, and a lot of neuroscience. Jumping, rocking, pushing against a wall, wrapping up in a blanket burrito, walking barefoot in grass, holding an ice cube. All of these things are ways we can help the body find its way back to safety without needing to talk it out. Something else that makes a huge difference is giving choices, because when we feel powerless, our nervous system feels threatened. And sometimes even the smallest sense of autonomy can shift everything. So instead of saying, get your shoes on, you might say, do you want to wear your blue shoes or your green ones? It's not about control. It's about feeling in control. And for kids with PDA profiles, this becomes even more important because demands can feel like threats. Offering options instead of commands can be a nervous system lifesaver. And finally, and maybe the most important thing to remember, is repair matters more than perfection. You're going to lose your cool sometimes. Your kid is going to fall apart sometimes. There will be moments where no tools work. But the good news is attachment research tells us that safety isn't built by never rupturing. It's built by coming back, by reconnecting. So after a hard moment, circle back and say, that was tough. I love you and we are still okay. And if it's with yourself, try, that was a lot. I didn't fail. I just flipped my lid and I'm still worthy of compassion. The truth is, we deserve this kind of care too. Most of us never got this growing up. No one explained to us how our brain worked or gave us tools to move through those big feelings. So now that we know better, we get to do better, not just for our kids, but for the younger versions of ourselves who didn't get what they needed. You don't have to push through. You don't have to perform your healing. You don't have to be high functioning to be worthy of rest and care. You get to move at the speed of safety. And that's what real healing looks like. Whew, okay, so that was a big one. And if you're feeling a little tender right now, that's okay. This stuff runs deep. So before we wrap up, let's take a second together to land in our bodies. If you're in a place where it's safe to do so, soften your shoulders, unclench your jaw, let your tongue fall from the roof of its mouth, and just take a slow, easy breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. You made it through this moment. You're doing the work, and you're not alone in this. If this episode gave you language for something you felt your whole life but couldn't quite explain, I'd be so honored if you shared it. Text it to a friend, post it to your stories, or please leave a quick review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. These shares are what help the NeuroSpicy MomPod grow and help more people feel seen and supported. And if you want to go deeper or help me keep this pod going, please come hang out with me on Patreon. You'll get bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes rambles, and first access to new projects. The link is always in the show notes, or you can find me at patreon.com/the NeuroSpicy MomPod. You are allowed to go slow, you are allowed to pause, and you are still worthy even when your brain and body say, I can't today. Healing isn't about hustling. Healing is about listening, and I'm so glad you're here doing that with me. All right, friends, until next time, take care of your sweet nervous systems, and I'll see you back here next week. Ta-ta for now.